let me give you the background here. First of all, the history a little bit. So the Jews, the Talmud speaks of the entry into Israel. I've chosen this topic, friends, because it's obviously very timely. You'll see in the end. And we've been studying this recently during the 3 weeks, and we're learning about the laws of the Beis Hamikdash, and part of that is the laws of the sanctity of Israel. So don't look in the text, just listen to me, because you're not going to understand. So the Jews entered Israel twice. And we're awaiting the third time kind of has begun already to some degree, but the real third entry happens when Mashiach comes, the final return. So the history, as you know, the first time we entered under Joshua, Yeshua, the successor of Moishe Rabbeinu, and then we were conquered by the Babylonians. The temple was destroyed, and we were exiled. We came back under the leadership of the great Jewish leader Ezra, known as Ezra the scribe. And he is one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time, on par with Moses himself. And he led the Jewish people back from Babylon 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. Permission was granted by King Cyrus of Persia. Stop and start, and eventually the second temple was built. That was destroyed on the same day as the first, as you know, on Tisha B'Av by the Romans. That began a long and bitter exile until the complete and final return and the building of the third eternal Beis Hamikdash. Okay, facts. Now, sanctity, the holiness of the land. The Talmud says that the holiness of the land conferred by Joshua was temporary. Temporary. And when the Jews were exiled, the holiness departed, with the exception of Jerusalem and the Beis Hamikdash. That's forever. But the rest of the country, the holiness departed. In what sense? What practical difference is? The holiness of the land obligates many agricultural laws. There's the sabbatical laws, the tithe, the laws of Shemitah, of sabbatical, the laws of tithing. Listen, this is an amazing statement. Shocking if you never knew it. When Joshua entered all the land that they conquered, and it was a huge swath of land going all the way deep in Lebanon, up to Syria, beyond Tyre. So for the hundreds of years from Joshua, 600-700 years, I'm sorry, 500, almost 1,000, 800 years, from Joshua till the Babylonians destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash, that whole area was holy land, and the laws that apply to the holy land I just told you, sabbatical laws, tithing, truma, all apply. When Babylonians invaded and the Jews were taken off into exile, the holiness is gone, and as far as the Torah is concerned, there's no obligations of tithing in the sabbatical year. Over. Temporary holiness. Shocking thing, but the Talmud says. However, Ezra, they came back the second time now, again 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. The area, which was a smaller area, didn't go nearly as far as north, and didn't extend very far below Jerusalem. I can show you a map. That is forever. That sanctity is forever, and therefore the obligations in that part of Israel, agricultural laws, remain scripturally enforced forever. The sanctity didn't leave. Now the question is, why not? The Talmud doesn't say why. Why was the first sanctity temporary, and the second one is permanent? I'm going to read what the Rambam says, the great Maimonides, who explains why, but when we read what he says, like we don't understand what he's saying. Our whole discussion today is going to be, I guess we'll continue next week, part 1, part 2, is 2 things, friends. To understand why the first sanctity was temporary, the second is forever. And then, as you see at the top of the page, there's ownership in their sanctity. ownership, who does it belong to, is not the question on the table here. That'll become clear presently. But holiness, now why aren't the two synonymous? If I own it, belongs to the Jewish people, wouldn't that mean that it's always holy? What I'm telling you now is, as you're going to see later, from the time of Abraham, the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. Way before Yeshua and way before Ezra. And that's forever. So you would think that if it belongs to us since then, it's the Holy Land since then. But no, the holiness of it is a separate dimension. Why? And why is it initially transient and then only permanent? That's the whole discussion. And it's going to give us a deeper appreciation of your and my relationship to the land of Israel and a lot of beautiful lessons along the way. It's a journey. Now it's going to begin with first the Rambam's explanation to explain. We're totally puzzled now. Yeshua's was temporary. Ezra's was permanent. What's the difference? Let's read. Just the summary. Here you can look later. There's, by the way, is a printing. I typed it out and there's some typos. And if you look at the Hebrew later, which we're not going to do right now, let's look at the summary, which gives us the summary. Summary. The holiness of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash, that's not on the table. That's forever. That's due to the eternal presence of the Shekhinah. So that's forever. And the Shekhinah never left. The Shekhinah never left the Beis HaMikdash. It's still a holy site. And the Shekhinah, the divine presence, never left Jerusalem. You can see that the Shekhinah ain't a betela. However, the holiness of the rest of the land, and therefore the obligation to observe the various agricultural commandments, that is a result of A and B. In the initial entry under Yeshua, conquest. Stop and listen up. Stop, listen up. The Rambam is saying that the holiness that was conferred by Yeshua when they entered the land initially was confirmed by kibush, by conquest. He conquered it, it became the Holy Land. It was subsequently nullified when the land was taken and conquered by the Babylonians. We conquered it, holy. They conquered it, there goes the holiness. We're puzzled right now. Why? But that's what the Rambam says. Under Ezra, final quote, the second entry, it wasn't through conquest. It was done. How was the holiness conferred? Possession. That is to say, by manifesting ownership. Hence, that holiness is forever. In Hebrew, chazaka. Let's just get what he says, and we'll soon get the questions. But he's saying, the reason the holiness round one is temporary, because it was conferred through conquest. And when they were reconquered, gone. The second holiness is conferred by simply settling it. And therefore, that's forever. Questions of the Kesef Mishnah. I didn't write what they are. Look, don't read, friends. You got to listen up because you're not going to understand anything if you read. The Kesef Mishnah, just tell you who he was, Rabbi Yosef Cairo. Rabbi Yosef Cairo is one of the greatest teachers in our history. He's the author of the first and original code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, upon which all the other codes are based. Before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote a commentary in the Rambam. All codes are based on the Rambam, ultimately. So he is totally puzzled. He doesn't know what the Rambam is saying. And he asks basically two questions. Why is conquest less viable than taking possession? We conquered it, it's ours. They're both are legal forms, legally. International law too. You conquer something, it's yours. So why is that weaker than they came back the second time? There was no battle to fight, friends. They got permission from the king of Israel, was under the rulership of the king of Persia. He gave them permission. All they did was just settle it. So why is that weaker than conquering? They settled, but then they left. Hey, yet the holiness remains. What's the difference? What's the difference? And now the biggest question. Here's the stronger question. After Yeshua conquered, they took possession. They're the best of both worlds. They conquered it. It's ours. They then manifested ownership over it, like they did the second time Why wouldn't that last? It's stronger. We've got what Ezra did later. We took possession. And before that, we conquered them. And yet that's temporary. So the whole thing is puzzling. Understand? Very simple. Kesef Mishnah bewildered. Doesn't answer. Doesn't understand the Rambam. The Rambam is explaining, the Talmud just says, a fact. This was temporary, this is permanent. The Talmud doesn't explain why. The Rambam's giving the why, and the Kesef Mishnah says, I don't understand your explanation. And make the question very clear. What Yeshua did, what Ezra did, is double. He conquered, which Ezra did not. What Yeshua did is double, and took possession, which Ezra only did later. So why shouldn't that last? So they proposed solutions. I'm just going to mention them briefly. The Radvaz and the Tosfos Yom Tov. We'll just address them quickly, and then we're actually going to reject their solutions. The Tosfos Yom Tov says, the Radvaz, famous scholar, he says the difference is verbal declaration of sanctity. He said, when Yeshua conquered, he didn't say, make a bracha, and therefore declare in the presence of the people, and this land is holy. Didn't make that declaration, so it didn't last. Ezra, every place they settled was a formal declaration. That's his answer. So the Rebbe says it's a very nice answer, but A, we don't read anywhere in Scripture that Yeshua made such declarations, and B, the Rambam doesn't say that's the distinction. You can't say that's the Rambam's reasoning. He doesn't mention a word about verbal declarations or not. He just says conquest versus ownership. So nice answer, but there's no support for it. And the Tosfos Yom Tov says, you know, the difference is, since the first time was by force, you took it by force, and was taken away by force, you lose it. The second time was granted permission. As I told you, King Cyrus had given permission. So since you settled it by permission, then no force can take it away. The Rebbe said, well, why not? Just because I got permission, and we're good. That because King Cyrus gave permission, therefore, even when we were exiled by the Romans 500 years later, the holiness remains because King Cyrus gave permission. What kind of logic is that? And besides, there's no hint of this in the words of the Rambam. And there are other answers offered as well. Each one of them, upon scrutiny, either it's you don't understand the answer really, or there's no support for it in the actual history. There's no indication it's actually happened, or the Rambam is not saying it. So we're left baffled. Good. Now we're going to start to get to the answer. Let's remember our question. Why didn't Yeshua's sanctity last? Why does Ezra's last? Conquest versus possession, manifesting possession. What's the difference? To understand this, look at point number 4. Which I already mentioned, the bottom of the page. Our whole discussion now, friends, is not about who owns the land. That's not a discussion. That is, the whole discussion is the holiness. What about the ownership? So turn the next page. We're going to revisit number 5 because it's very important, but let's just get it here. Try and read with me together, because otherwise you read ahead. Friends, just how many sources in number 5? Just count them. How many? They're all these verses. 1, 2, yeah, 3, 4, 5. You see that? There's a broken line between the two. Yeah. All of these are God's promises to Abraham. Why do I break it up into? The first 2 God gives, you can see it's chapter 13, Yud Gimel, and 15. The first 2, God just promised him. He told him. The last 3 verses there come later, where Abraham questions, how will I know I will inherit it? And then God reiterates his promise again at the covenant, the bris bein absorim. Listen up, there's a covenant. We're all called b'nei brith. Listen up, folks. You heard the invocation called b'nei brith? What are they talking about? Not talking about the circumcision. It's the covenant between the parts, it's called, that God forged with Avram and us forever. It's described at length in the Torah, a whole ceremony of an animal divided and fire and smoke, the covenant. And that covenant is when the latter verses come. Now let's just look at it for a moment. Right now, what's relevant is this. God says to you and your children, I will give it forever. So ownership starts when? With you and you. Avram, rise up and walk to its length and its breadth, for to you I will give it. But notice, we're going to pick this up later next week. It's subtle. It's future. It's future. On the other hand, he says to you, Avram lives now. So there's an element of present and also an element of future. You notice that? But it's still to you. So it is now to you and your children. But there's still a future. Then later, that's one story. Later on, Avram questions, how will I know I will inherit it? I want a sign. And then God says, you take the animal and divide it, and you'll see the fire, the divine presence will be revealed. He had this sign, the covenant between the parts forever. After this whole divine revelation, God says to give you, and I did this now as a sign that you will have, to give you the land as an inheritance in Yerusha, in response to his question, inherit. And then to your seed, I have given it. And the Talmud, Jerusalem says, I've already given it. So there's two things that happened at the covenant of the part. Number one, not just a gift, but an inheritance. We don't see the word inheritance in the first promise. The second promise, it's soon after, it's not long after. Inheritance, and it's past tense, much stronger. Okay, we're going to revisit that. But on the simple level, this is all talking about ownership. Who owns it? So I said that before. We own the land of Israel from the time of Abraham, and that's forever and not negotiable. The whole discussion now is the holiness. So look now at number 6. And say before you look at it, listen up. We're going to get to the essence of the answer now. The beauty will come next week. So you have to remember a whole week. If we look at, listen, don't read, listen to me. This is an all-time teacher I know. If you read it, you don't hold you in. So I just got it. I love you and I want you to get the subject that I'm such a, what's the word? Teacher that, yeah, all right. Disciplined, demand discipline. The key to this whole mystery is, the Rabbi says like this. Let's look at the divine instruction and contrast to the way Yeshua was told to go in and the way Ezra was told to go in. What's the language? What's the mandate? The holiness, number one is, God says like this. This is the first thing we've got to appreciate. The holiness, kinderlach, you guys are going to bring that. You're going to bring the holiness because you're holy. The land belongs to you. In essence, it's the Holy Land. True. But it should, not just in essence, but be in a revealed way. That's you. That's what a Jew does. You know, it's kind of like, there's a pair of tefillin on the, it's similar. And a Jew never put it on before. It's one degree of holiness. Once a Jew puts it on, it's a whole different level. The whole point is the Jew should put it on. So the holiness of the land is our presence, our engagement is going to make it the Holy Land. Now, there's two separate instructions. And they're very different. When Yeshua goes in, God says, conquer it. He says, war. You take that land by force. They were given a choice, mind you. You didn't have to fight. Leave. Anybody that doesn't leave, you'll conquer. And it's also by force in the sense you're not giving anybody any choice. Now the choice is fight me or don't fight me. But either way, it's conquering. And it went very smoothly. There was only when, for the most part, it was miraculous and beautiful. When they went back with Ezra, the instruction there was, and we look at the verses in scripture, don't conquer it. First, we didn't need to because they were given permission by the king. But it's not just that. It's you're going to manifest your ownership not by reclaiming something you once conquered. Conquering is off the table now. Just manifest your ownership. Let's look at the verses. We'll see it's subtle. Number 6. The first entry under Yeshua, in Hebrew, Knesset Rishona, the Torah says, pass over it armed. And the next quote, and the land shall be conquered before you. That's what God told Moishe Rabbeinu, and Yeshua was the one that executed it. Actually, Moishe, the second quote is, the first one is Moishe telling Yeshua, go armed. Now, all right, bottom line, the first one, by divine instruction. That's how you're going to bring the holiness, by asserting your authority and driving people out against their will. They don't want to leave. Either they're too scared to fight you, or they fight you and you'll defeat them. But the second entry under Ezra, so the prophet says, when they were exiled, God says, I will remember you to restore you to this place. The prophecy of beginning doesn't say you'll come back and you'll conquer it again. This is way before there was even a Persian king, way before it all. There's no mention you're going to come back as warriors again. You'll be restored. And the same prophet said, and if you don't, and if you're not loyal, they will dwell in the cities which you took, not they will dwell, the foreigners, in the cities which you conquered. There's a very strong absence here of evoking the way they originally came, which is through conquering. You're going to restore you, and if you don't keep loyal to the commandment, you will lose that which you took, not that which you conquered. The second time, clearly, now is by divine command to be taken by just manifest ownership. So let me get now to the bottom line. What this means is this. I started saying earlier, the land belongs to us all along. It always belongs to us from the time of Avram. The first time they went in, God is saying, I want you bring the holiness by force. And not by manifesting possession. So even though Yeshua manifested possession, but afterwards, that didn't figure in the equation because it wasn't the mandate. It didn't add anything. One of our questions was, but Yeshua conquered and then took possession, just like Ezra did later. So why wouldn't that be forever? Because it wasn't the mandate. The exclusive mandate was conquering. You conquered, someone else conquered you. Holiness is over. Bring the holiness through conquering it. The second one is, here's the big nuance. Bring the holiness by tapping into the holiness that was always there because it's yours. It's a different kind of holiness. Yeshua brings the holiness from the outside, and Ezra's told, unlock the holiness that was always there. Tap into that which was always there. And now we get our answer. If I'm tapping into that which is always there, and now it's manifested, that can never be removed because the holiness is linked to the ownership, and the ownership we always had. The first holiness was not linked to ownership. It was like imposed. Yours it is, but holiness, so while you're there behaving holy, it's holy. You're not behaving holy, and therefore you get conquered by an invader. You go and your holiness goes too. But the second time, it's a whole deeper thing. Now you're going back. The holiness is going to be by tapping into the fact that you're an owner. Now that's forever, always was, always will be. Therefore, this holiness always will be. Now we're going to see next week. I'm just going to start it now. This is the difference between the tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva. Tzaddik is like temporary. Baal Tshuva is like forever. I'll explain why in a second. And that's why it has to go that way, because that's the way life goes. We're born innocent and beautiful, but that's temporary. And then we do stupid things. And then we do teshuvah. That's forever. That mirrors the conquering, the first time of Yeshua, and Ezra, the second time, which is teshuvah. The Jews came back when they did teshuvah. We're going to revisit the whole story with what God says to Avram initially. We'll see these two elements there, the beginning, tzaddik, and then Abraham kind of questions, which is on his level considered a sin, but then he does teshuvah, and then he becomes an inheritor. We're going to go deeper, gift versus an inheritance. So this is all going to be, God willing, next week, a kind of a standalone class, but it'll all link to and explain everything he said till now. But our takeaway today is, conclusion is like this. Ownership forever, from time of Avram. That's never a question. Holiness, the first time, was kind of brought to the land by our own holy behavior. When we didn't behave holy, it just was gone. The second time, we tap into the inherent holiness in the land that was there all along. And that's the Baal Tshuva. The Baal Tshuva, as we're going to explain next week, where does the Teshuvah come from? The tzaddik's, I have to explain a little bit. The tzaddik's relationship with God is, I believe in God, I love God, I'm motivated. It's all for all of these reasons. And they can go. They could be lost. True teshuvah is a return to God, not because I love, I want, I understand, but because I am a Jew. I am a Jew. That's what true teshuvah brings out. Notwithstanding, I violated every part of our relationship. So what's left? Where's your love? Where's your devotion? Where's your understanding? Where's your feeling? Gone. So where's your teshuvah coming from? Yes, but I still am a Jew. Oh, that's tapping into something it always was. And that's forever. And when that's revealed, since it's not contingent upon feelings, understanding, I'm unlocking I am. And if I'm sustaining that, it's forever. We're going to go deeper into that. That's the Ezra story as opposed to the Yeshua story. Yeshua tzaddikim, right? Didn't last. Ezra teshuvah, that's forever. And that's hinted to in way God talks to Abraham, round 1, round 2, gift versus inheritance. Next week to be explored further. We're getting a sense of it. Okay. It's a bit of a cliffhanger, huh? Okay, Jay, you're happy you got up this morning? Okay, we did.